Hello, this is Benji's Code, and today we are going to be making a weather app in React. So for this weather app, we're going to be using an API called OpenWeather, as you can see on the screen now. I will leave a link to the correct API in the description. And yeah, so this will be a React app that uses this OpenWeather API alongside with a built-in geolocator for React. It will grab the um, coordinates of your browser, so that way you can get the correct weather report no matter where you are, no matter what computer you're on. And it allows us to just have that. There's no hard-coded variables to get um, certain coordinates, although you will be starting with just using variables for the initial setup, and then we'll build in the geolocator later. But yeah, so here's the open weather. You can go to API, and then we're going to be using one call because that's the free option. But here it is, the documentation. Again, I'll link to this in the description. But for now, we are going to be setting up the React app first, and we'll get back to the API. For my code editor, we are going to be using Visual Studio Code. You should be able to use any code editor you want. So I'm already in a folder called projects. I'm going to open my terminal, and here is where it starts. So I'm going to create a folder, and that is mkdir for create or make directory, and then we're going to name it. So weather-app, do that, ls, make sure it's there, and we can also now see it in the code editor. We're going to cd into that weather app, and now here is where we're going to create it. So we can do npx create react app, and I'm going to put space period. So there's two options here. You could put a folder name here that you want to be created with the React app, but since we already created the folder and we're now inside of the folder, we can do dot, and that just tells it to create the React app where it currently is. So we're going to run that, and that should take a while. So I will cut the video and see you when it's done. Alright, so now that the React app is done, we can take a look inside of it. And actually, before we look inside of it, when it finishes installing, it will show you these commands. Most of them you don't have to worry about, but this npm start, that's how we're going to be starting the app. So that will start on localhost 3000 by default. When you do run it later, when we get something set up, it should automatically open your browser, but if it does not, you can open up your browser and go to localhost 3000, and you should be good. So yeah, we can open up this weather app. It has created some node modules, which we don't have to touch. Public, we don't have to touch. But the source is what we're going to be concerned about. In the app.js is where we're going to be putting our code. Everything else, index. Actually, in the index, I'm going to remove this strict mode because that just makes it re-render an additional time, which we don't need for this. I don't want to be getting duplicates, so we can save that. And everything else in here, we don't have to touch. So back into the app, we can, actually let me make this smaller so you can see more of it. Yeah, so all of this header stuff we don't need, but it kind of just shows a logo on the screen. So we can delete the whole header, and we can put, just to test it out, an h1 saying my weather app. Alright, now if we save that and just check to make sure it's working, we can do npm start. After running that, it should start up a app that, yeah, there we go. And it's loading. Ooh, why is it taking so long? Alright, there we go. So you can see now that the H1 that we put there is now showing up. So our site is officially running on localhost 3000. Awesome. So now if we go back to our code, we should be able to start making a component. So now you could keep working in the app, but I like to break things apart and get a better structure. So in the source, we are going to make a folder called uppercase weather, enter, and then make another file inside of that also called weather.js, uppercase as well. Alright, so now in here, to get the default or autofilled boilerplate, we can do RFCE and then click tab on that and it should autofill. If it does not, you can just create the import and make your own function. Yeah, so in here, let's create, let's first import a use state and a use effect. So the use state we're going to use to store the data we get back from the API, and then the use effect will be our initial run, the thing that tells it to run the fetch. But you'll see when we use that. Alright, now we got that set up, we can write another H1 in here saying weather, yeah, just weather. So that way we can see if it's set up. So now after we save this, we can go back into the app, and here is, actually let's remove the logo because we're not going to be using that. So on a new line, we can import weather. So let's import the weather we just made. So /weather goes into that folder, and then slash again to the component. You don't need to put .js with JS files, although you do with the majority of other files. But with that, the name should be good. Alright, so let's test this out by linking to it, and we do that with just weather slash and close. Save that, and if we go back to the site, we can see the weather showed up now. Okay, awesome. Back to the code. What am I doing now? Okay, so here we can start creating some variables. Well, actually back into the component. We can start creating variables like the longitude and latitude of the location we want to get the weather report from. Like I said before, we're going to eventually use geolocation that will automatically get this data for us, but as of right now, we are just going to hard code it. So const lon equals, let's do -8,000. I don't know where that goes, but we'll see. Const lat equals, let's do 40,000. Alright, now we are going to make a variable for our API key. So here is where you actually need to sign up for the weather. So if we go back to the website, this one call thing, so we're going to not be using this exactly. So if you want to copy this into, actually we'll get to that in a second. First, we're going to create the variable for our API keys. So after you sign up, I believe there's about a 10 to 15 minute wait before your API key is actually activated, but you should get an email saying like verify your email and stuff like that. The sign up process isn't too difficult. However, if you don't get an email with the actual API key in it, you can find your API key by going to My API Keys. And I have two. You will probably only have one, but you can just generate a new one. I'm going to use this most recent one, so we can copy that and go back over to our code, and let's switch back over. Now let's make another variable called const API key equals in strings, paste your key in there. Alright, now close that off, and now we can start working on actually, let's make our use state first, so that we have a place, so that way we have a place to store our data after we get it. So let's go with const weather data dot set weather data, and this will be equal to the use state that we imported. This is just a different way. It's React's way of storing and manipulating data or variables just to store it. Many different things you can do with that, but we're just going to be using it to store it. And we're going to leave it empty, but we will add to it inside of the fetch call that we make. Okay, so now it is time to use our use effect. Oops. Okay, so use effect. Now, oops, what's going on there? Now we need to put a empty set of brackets in there, and that will tell it to just run once every time the page re-renders. Let's create another variable that is going to be API. It's going to be our route equals, actually not quotes, but backticks. And here is where we are going to go back to the website and go back to this API one call. Again, I'll have this linked, but yeah, grab this API call. We're gonna copy this, go back over into our code, and alright, so now that we have that API route, we're going to paste it into our template literals, and it's gonna go just like that. But there are some things that we have to change about this. So I was experimenting with this 3.0. It did not work for me. I'm assuming maybe if you sign up again, this might work for you, but for me, I have to do 2.5, and that will work. So we're grabbing the one call, and this is where we have the lat. I'm not sure, for some reason on the website they don't have dollar signs in front of it, but inside of these, in front of these curly brackets, we have to put a dollar sign to tell it that it's taking in a variable. Same with the long and exclude part. We are going to do not curly brackets at all, but we're going to do minutely, and that will I'll show the data later as well, but that will just not give us the weather per minute because we're not using that. We're just going to be using the daily, and that's all we're going to be using. However, if you want to use the minutely, then you just wouldn't put this in there. But as of right now, that is what we are doing. Okay, so API key, the name of the variable that we made, and another dollar sign. And before this exclude, actually, I want to put in units. So I'm gonna, where do we put it? It's right before the exclude, and it's imperial. Yeah, I think that's the right one. So we are going to exclude right there. So right after the long, we're going to write and units equals imperial, and then and symbol again, and then continue with the exclude and the rest of the URL. Now that should work as it is there. Alright, so awesome. We got the whole API set up basically. Now we just need to make the fetch call. So the fetch call is fetch comes with React, so there's no need to import anything. So we can just go ahead and write fetch in here. We can put this API like that. And now on a new line, we can do .then. So after this fetch is complete, it will run this line. And we are going to receive a response. So just res arrow, and now res.json. So what res.json will do is convert the response, which is going to be the data, into JSON, so that way we can use it in React. And now the result of this is going to have to go into a new .then, or another .then, and we're going to call this one data, mine as well. Let's open up some curly brackets and console log this data, just to get a look at it before we start really using it. And I think everything's good here. Let's go over back to the website and check it out, see if it's working. Back to our React app. Now if we refresh, we're not going to see anything. That's because we're console logging it, so we have to inspect the element, which for some reason isn't showing up in my recorder. But if you right click on the website, just on the white space, and go down to inspect element and click on inspect element, that should pop up a console. You hop over to the console tag and we should be logging out this object. Now here is the data that we're receiving for the coordinates that we put in. So if you change up those coordinates, you should be getting a different weather report. But yeah, here are all of the categories. So we have current, which we're not going to be touching for right now. And then we have daily, which is what we're going to be using. So daily is an array, and each item has its daytime, or this is the date. And since this is one long number, we're going to have to convert that using React dates and stuff like that. And then our icons are in here as well. Sunrise, pressure, just, temperature, a whole bunch of information. Inside of weather, we have main, description, and then icon. So later on, we'll be setting up those icons and stuff like that. And when we were talking about the exclude, we were just saying exclude this, right? So hourly. So there's just another way of limiting how much data you get. And since we're only using daily, we could also put hourly in there, but we don't want to limit it too much. But yeah, time zone, America, New York. And yeah, so in the next episode, we will be getting into actually using this data, displaying it on the screen, converting this DT number, this long, crazy number, into an actual day. And we can use that to sort like a whole week out and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully you liked this episode, and the next one we will be getting into displaying it, possibly the geolocation. That might be the third. But yeah, hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one.